So good afternoon and welcome to the webinar of the launch of WRI India's Hydrogen TCO Bus Evaluator. Let me introduce you today's panelists. We have Dr. Geeta Krishnan Ramadurai, Associate Professor, IIT Madras, Mr. Chandrasekhar Chincholkar, Strategic Advisor, KPIT Technologies, Mr. Rahul Kataria, General Manager, Commercial Vehicle Business, Tata Motors, Mr. Rohan Rao, Program Manager, Electric and Hydrogen Mobility, WRI India, Dr. Gunja Munjal, Program Manager, Hydrogen, WRI India, and Mr. Pavan Malukutla, who is our Director, Clean Mobility and Energy Tech. So Mr. Malukutla will also be moderating today's session. I welcome you all once again, and we are very delighted that you all could join us for this webinar. I would request Mr. Pavan Mulukutla now to please launch and introduce the Hydrogen TCO Bus Evaluator now. Over to you, Pavan.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's the launch of our Hydrogen Bus virtual launch, and this is hosted on our website, and happy that you all can register yourself and download the evaluator. I think that's the process, right, Rohan? Yeah, and we are what I would say is that this is going to be extremely useful in getting inputs from all of you for the evaluator itself. And we have come up with certain assumptions and certain pricing based upon our own market research, but happy to hear from all of you. If you have alternative numbers, you can play around with your play around with the tool and get back to us, letting us know your suggestions, and we're happy to tweak. But the whole basis for putting this out today was also that I think there's a lot of unknown things in the way we look at the hydrogen. And we have been talking about electric buses so far, and now we are talking suddenly about the hydrogen buses, with few states showing interest to deploy also. So we thought this is an appropriate time to really start talking in terms of the financial implications that will have, and what kind of policy measures would really be then required to take this forward. So I think the latter part of the discussion today will also focus on not just the technological elements of the hydrogen fuel cell bus, but also on what kind of policy measures that would be needed, what kind of subsidies are we really talking about, and where do we see the future of hydrogen fuel cell buses in India specifically, in terms of how it would move forward. So what we would do is that we will do a short demo. That's the plan, right, Anandita? That do a demo of the TCO by my colleague Rohan, who would walk us through what have been the assumptions, what have been the parameters you have taken into consideration. And then we'll open up for a moderated discussion with Professor Geeta, with Mr. Rahul Kataria and Mr. Chincholkar from KPIT, and then we'll take Q&A from the audience as well. So with that, either Rohan, Anand, back to you guys.
I'll take over. Thank you. Thank you, Pawan. So I'll just share my screen and give a brief demonstration of how it can be downloaded, how we can play around. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Hydrogen Bus TCO Evaluator launch. So let's just share my screen. Are you able to see this?
Yeah, Rohan, we can see a full screen.
Great. So you can just go to our WRI India website and then go to what we do and topics, and our new initiatives is hydrogen. So you can read a bit about our work and research pertaining to hydrogen. It's an enabler for cross-sectoral decarbonization, and all the research and the videos and events here. At the end, we also have the certain projects that you can click on the Hydrogen TCO Evaluator. And then, you can click on download the evaluator and you'll get the TCO evaluator itself, right? So let me just run through the evaluator. So if you can see my screen now. Yeah. So here the TCO evaluator generally basically has the three main sheets. The first sheet would be.
Just sorry to interrupt. If you'll have to zoom in while explaining in the Excel. Yeah. Just
yeah. Very good. Thank you. Is it better now? Okay. So yeah, so the three main sheets here. One is the instructions itself, how to use this dynamic cost of ownership dashboard. The ones in colored green can be edited, and you can add your own values. And the one in gray are fixed, and that cannot be edited. So it also gives you what are the functions, what are the actions required, and so forth. The second one, the one here, is the heart of the evaluator itself. So this has all the green cells which can be changed, and the changes can be seen on this dynamic dashboard, which I will go in detail in a few minutes. The last one is, of course, the summary. This summary sheets kind of gives you a complete overview of whatever you inputted, the backend calculations, and then kind of gives you the final total cost of ownership throughout the lifetime of the bus itself. So I'll just quickly share what are the different components that goes into this hydrogen bus TCO evaluator. So here it's broken up into two components. This part is the input component, where you can add the different travel details, and this is basically the output component. This is a dynamic dashboard. It will showcase whatever changes have been done in the input, and the output is just thrown, right? So the first one is the vehicle holding period. You can change it to whatever you want to look at year 14, year 15, and then it will show the concurrent changes of the TCO at that specific year. And of course, you can add what will be the daily distance travel, the vehicle utilization itself, right from intracity, where it can travel 250 kilometers per day. Then you can see the TCO per kilometer, and you keep on increasing it to 300 kilometers. You see a change on here, and then you see in intercity or interstate. If you travel 500 kilometers per day, what could be the effect of the total cost of operation ownership on these kind of buses of all the variants? And this also breaks down into what is the component cost, which is 86% of the fixed cost, what is the percentage on variable costs, and then you can also see its effect over the period of utilization. That's with the vehicle components. The other one is, of course, the capital cost itself. So this portion is broken down into CAPEX, the capital expenditure component, and the operational expenses, right? So we have also provided the opportunity to change the currencies. So you can see you can input your values in INR, the Indian rupees. You can change the dollars, and it will change it to the concordant values, and of course to the miles and everything. And you can also change it to the euros. So for the international markets also, they can do a cost verification of what would be the cost of a hydrogen vehicle running on a gray hydrogen, and an electric bus and a diesel bus, right? So currently, I'll just go back to the INR component, and you can see it comes back to rupees per kilometer, and all of these can be changed. So currently, and firstly, these numbers are just representative, and like Pawan alluded to, these are the numbers that we have taken based on certain one-on-one conversations with many industry experts, leaders, and also certain literature review that you've done. So currently, if it's 5 crores, you can always change it. If you feel it's 3.5 crores, you can change it, and you can see that the number changes here. It drops down by a certain amount. If you think that the electric buses, it's more than 2 crores and goes over 3 crores, you can change it. So all of these numbers can be changed, and all the users can play around with these numbers. And also, there are certain financial incentives that the government of India under FAME 2 provides. So for example, an e-bus with 280 kilowatt hour battery component, you get up to 50 lakhs of incentives. So if you input that number, you can see that the TCO again drops. If you have it for 350, it makes more sense. So you can see if you remove that, it's around 54 rupees, and you add the incentive, it drops by 6 rupees per kilometer. So you can play around with this, and also look at, could there be any policy levers that the government of India can utilize? And what if they were to provide equivalent, say 50 lakh rupees as incentives? So you can see that the rupees per kilometer in hydrogen green vehicles also drops. Similarly, you can add on to the other capital intensive costs of how many battery or a fuel stack replacements that would be required over the 15 or 10 years utilization period of the buses. So currently we've said 2. What happens if there are 3 changes, right? Then again it changes from 130 to 141 rupees, right? What happens if the battery has to be changed 4 times? Then 6 rupees per kilometer changes there. And again, the fuel cell components, currently we're saying that it costs around $1,500 per kilowatt hour for a fuel cell stack. What happens in the next few years? it drops down to $850. The cost drops down. What happens if it drops to 850? So these are the kinds of changes or inputs that this TCO evaluator can take, and the people can utilize this. And again, the other components are, of course, the resale rates at the end of the 10 or 15 years. What will be the kind of resale rate? Again, the financing component also plays a huge role, because a 5 crore vehicle purchase cost, no one is putting the whole money into an individual bus. So there'll be some amount of equity and interest rate. So what happens if the interest rates goes up, right? Then your TCO increases. What happens if there's aggressive pricing and reduces? So you can see that TCO drops. So all of this TCO evaluator takes into account the different components of capital intensive inputs. And of course, the operational expenses, which are the recurring costs. What is the cost per staff cost per month? So you say it's 50,000. What happens if it is? I'll just zoom a bit. What happens? It's 132 now. What happens if the staff cost increases to 1 lakh, right? So you can see that the increase across all variants, because it's a recurring cost. The operational expense is a recurring cost. What happens if the fuel cost, currently we're assuming it to be rupees 180 per kg for a gray hydrogen? What happens if it drops to $1, right? What happens if the green hydrogen drops to say $2? So you can see a significant drop from 125, 140, it drops down to 180, right? And then of course the mileage quantity, if it's 15 kilometers per kg and currently it's 118, what happens if the mileage increases? You can see it drops down around 2 rupees per kilometer and similar. And again, the annual maintenance cost can be checked out based on the real world applications. Currently diesel might have a bit more annual maintenance cost, where the electric buses might have minimum moving components, hence they might have less maintenance cost. So all of these different moving parts have been taken into account. So I would encourage everyone, all of our attendees today, to go to our website, download our TCO evaluator and play around with the numbers, input their own values, and try to develop different models on when cost parity will reach. And we'll be very happy to get your feedback also onto this. So with that, I'll stop and I'll put it back to Ananda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohan. I hope everybody was able to get a glimpse of our evaluator. And now I request Pawan to start the moderating the session, where we'll be taking questions from the attendees as well. Over to you, Pawan.
Sure, thank you. But I just wanted to start with Mr. Chincholkar ji from KPIT. That you all have, I don't know if you had a chance to see the numbers that Rohan was talking about, but I just wanted to understand two aspects. One is we clearly see, I know last month you all also developed an indigenous bus on hydrogen fuel cell, and we're talking about this technology transition in India with EVs already and with hydrogen. My first question is, where do we see the potential of hydrogen fuel cell based buses in India in terms of the route choices and their application? And then I'll come back to the cost parameters shortly on that, but just your initial reactions around that. You are on mute, Mr. Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies. Good afternoon all. India currently has around 20 lakh buses. If you take about, because we launched the bus last month and it was a 9-meter bus. So India currently has around 20 lakh buses, out of which almost 9 lakh buses are intercity buses, 6 lakh are corporate, and balance are all STU, CTU plus school buses. So if you look at intercity applications with around 400 kilometers per day running, I think that is an area where 9-meter and 12-meter can actually fit in very well. And at a certain price point for the hydrogen as well as the bus price point, we should definitely be able to match or beat the TCO for diesel. So we see a significantly higher deployment of the vehicles, because this transition to electric mobility or hydrogen mobility, it is as not as an alternative, but end of the day, it's going to be a compulsion in reality. Because if you really want to meet net zero and zero objectives, I think this is going to be a significant step towards mitigating the CO2 emissions. India currently has roughly 22% emissions coming from mobility, balance 78% comes from manufacturing. So out of these intercity 9 lakh buses, I can say definitely in the next 5 to 7 years, we should be able to move to at least 10% plus. Yeah.
Yeah, but any reactions, Professor Geeta?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting that Chinchulkar says, intercity buses, right, is what we should target initially, right? I agree with him there, right, because I think intracity EVs may still, dominate. I think intercity is where, with the say distance of about 400, 500 kilometers a day, right? I think that's definitely a place where hydrogen will have better edge compared to electric buses, right? And one of the reasons is, of course, that with the battery buses, we're carrying the dead weight, right? So when the bus is out of charge, the weight of the battery is still there, and so that's going to impact. Whereas that's not the case with hydrogen. So I kind of reflect what he says, but 10% is very ambitious, right? So I think there's a lot of other things that
we are.
Yeah.
If you look, Geeta, what the government has actually said in one of its mission objectives is that they want 30% electric mobility by 2030. So assume that these 20 lakh buses, these are currently at say around 1500 per million. That is the population. That is the density of buses in India. But if you look at what is the global average, you look at countries like Brazil, South Africa, they are all at 4,000-5,000 buses per million. So we are already at 40% of what we should be in reality. And secondly, the government is planning to have 30% electric mobility by 2030. So let us assume that out of that, 80% will be battery electric. So even if 20% has to be fuel cell electric, I think that number will be more than 1 lakh buses. So
yeah, I think
you would probably be knowing, in terms of the hydrogen pricing, you would be aware that some of the guys like electrolyzer guys like OMIM and all, they have declared. I think OMIM has partnered with IIT Madras also, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
so they're talking about $1 per kg price by 2025. So when they're talking, if they're talking $1, then obviously dispense cost would be in the range of around 200 rupees. Sure. With a mileage of 15.
Going back to the calculator that they showed, I think one of the biggest difference was the initial cost, right, which was about 2.5 times of electric bus and about 6 to 7 times of a diesel bus, right? I think that number is something which is going to really play a big role in people's decision, right? So any thoughts on that? Why is that such a big cost, or how that could be brought down?
See, if you look at Europe, typical say 12-meter bus, hydrogen bus, the costing would be in the range of 3.5 to 4 crores. So if you take a 9-meter bus costing, I think it will be somewhere in the range of 3 or 3.25 crores. So see, we have done ground up work, and we are the only company who has developed the fuel cell in totality from ground up. It's not the case that we imported a stack from Ballard and did the engineering on that, but we developed the stack completely. And currently our bus is running fine. The trials have actually begun, and 80-90% of the supply chain in India. I think that is a very critical point of view of rolling out buses is concerned. And see, ultimately, the model is going to be at some of the battery electric tenders that have come now, or I think recently, 2 days before CESL also, Conservation Energy Services Limited also has come out with a tender for 5,500 buses. So they are the lead managing agency for those tenders for around 5 cities. I think Bangalore, Surat, Calcutta, and few more cities. They are all going to be run on GCC basis, cost contract. So it's all going to be revenue per kilometer. So if it is going to be revenue per kilometer, which I believe the World Bank has also advised, very they have pushed all the governors to ensure that this GCC model is accepted, and that is what we are seeing the result now. So I think people will have to move to long distance travel with rate at revenues per kilometer, rupees per kilometer, and then they will have to stick to that particular model to ensure that you go maximum 400, 500, 600 kilometers on a daily basis, so that your TCO keeps dropping. But we are pretty confident we should be able to bring the cost down below 3 crore rupees in the initial years. But obviously that goes with certain volumes. So those certain volumes need to be really looked at. Yeah. But I believe there was a PLI in this in Delhi High Court. So they have actually directed the DHI, Department of Heavy Industries, to issue incentives also for fuel cell buses.
Thank you, Mr. Chincholkar. Rahul, let me bring you in terms of some of the questions also being asked, like what kind of policy measures do you think will make hydrogen buses viable in India? And what is the timeline that you see for the deployment of hydrogen buses in India? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so currently,
and if I can request you to turn on your video, that
yeah. Yeah, is it there now? Yeah. Yeah, good afternoon. So, see, what I am looking forward to in this hydrogen, I think this will be something which will follow the electric route. And already we are seeing a lot of, STUs and government institutions coming forward for the electric. And we saw CESL coming up with a tender for 5,500 buses. And few of the CAPEX purchases also happening by the STUs. Rather of late, we have seen, what is propelling the demand today is the higher cost of the fuel. So hydrogen from that angle today is a bit distant away, I would say. And it is the cost of the diesel as well as the CNG going up by 20% in last 1 year, which is actually propelling the demand for zero emission, lower cost model for the various operators and the STUs. So I think this next 3-4 years are more on electric and thereafter the hydrogen, if that answers the question.
You see that within 3 years we'll be able to switch to hydrogen? I mean, there'll be
minimum 3-4 years are for electric, as I said. And once the electric stabilizes, and then maybe it will be more of technological, shift, which will take some time. But yes, I would say that maybe 3-4 years. The development itself will take that much time, maybe more, for these fuels and coming up commercially availability. So this is minimum time frame I see.
Fair enough. Yeah, Professor Geeta.
Yeah. So if I can just come in there about the policy, definitely without government support, we will not see hydrogen come up into the mainstream, right, in the next 10 years or so. All right. So there has to be a significant component of subsidy, right, that kicks in, especially with the initial cost of purchase, right, or even if it's GC, right, still there has to be some assurance for the operators that over a period of time they're going to get back the cost that they invest in initially, right? And there, I think the government has a big role to play. Right? It's only, especially in the buses, the sector that we're talking about, right? It's only if they come out with fairly large subsidies, right? Can we see these timelines that are being quoted, right, in the next 10 years or so? And even there, I think what we need is perhaps for the government to have a much broader perspective, right? Rather than look at things from a TCO, right? Also look at it from a social cost perspective. Okay. What will be the social cost and benefits rather than the cost, the benefits that we will get as a result of moving towards net zero emissions, right, will be fairly significant. What are the corresponding benefits we can get out of that? And therefore, flow in more subsidy so that we realize those benefits. So that's something that we need more research on, more policy analysis on.
Yeah, Chandra, you wanted to say something?
Basically, in terms of the policy parameters, see, other than this initial support for maybe 10,000, 20,000 vehicles, from the government side for the subsidy part. We obviously need to look at some subsidy on the fuel side also, that people do for, say, like electrolyzers or maybe through the biomass route, because we ourselves have two techs which are based on biomass. One is cellulosic and one is the gasification route. So we have recommended to the government to give 10-year tax holiday, as was given in the case of solar and all. So those recommendations have been given. We also a dedicated biomass sort of a crop to be created, which we have identified, and that crop can be grown to really ensure that farmers do that, and they get additional income, which will be significantly higher than current 17, 18, 20,000 rupees per acre, for an average farmer. And I think that those will be the areas which needs to be really promoted by the government. And other than this, they need to give support in terms of STU, CTU also, to ensure that proper escrow mechanism. See, the biggest problem today is the payout. If somebody STU, CTU has to run the buses on with any private sector party coming in, because once you go to GCC model, only thing that is left is that the manufacturer will sell the bus to the finance company and the operating company, and the operating company will basically be operating that vehicle. So assurance of that money on a monthly basis, I think through budgetary support from the local state governments. So what would be a better mechanism is that you continuously do say provide 3 months of support in terms of EMIs, which is always there in the bank account, so that the escrow mechanism can actually operate in a very well way. And the operators are encouraged to invest more, because ultimately their investment is going to be recovered over the next 7, 8 or 10 years. So it is not easy for anybody to look at such long-term capital deployment and long-term capital deployment at the same time, so much of commitment to business, because you never know what can be the issues in terms of the battery cost, the maintenance cost, etc. Which, because these are all areas which are currently evolving. So it will take another 6, 8 months, 1 year for us to really understand where would the maintenance cost would actually go. So I think these are the areas of support which we feel are pretty important for the government to look at.
Yeah. There's a question which I thought is interesting, which is also one of the questions I had listed. And this is addressed, I think, to all three of you, to Professor Geeta, to Mr. Chincholkar, and to Rahul. So since we are talking about government is passing laws for better subsidies, what is the general lag that is noted with respect to policy framing and implementation, and any thoughts around that?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Government is passing laws for better subsidies. What is the general lag that is noted with respect to policy framing and implementation, and what is the current status? In hydrogen, I don't think there is any policies per se for buses actually right now. It is more related to the national hydrogen mission, which is still being developed. But I know in Kerala, they are interested in deploying 10 hydrogen buses, and that's something the state is exploring. But other than that, any other states or cities that have explored? I think any initiatives, Rahul, you want to talk about at least the testing of the hydrogen fuel cell buses in India that Tata Motors is involved in?
Yeah, so I would say this is in the development stages, where even the petroleum companies like HPCL, IOCL, and few of the STU, as you mentioned, Kerala, they are wanting to try out this option and develop this technology further. So that is all the kind of demand which we see as on today, with few of the organizations coming together to develop the new next level of technology. As you said, from the government initiatives perspective or policies perspective, yes, we are currently seeing a lot of focus on the electric thing, and that is what we see will actually continue, because this also was a very slow starter. If we see in the FAME 1 scheme, and then the FAME 2 came, but now with few STUs operating the electric successfully, and others visiting them and understanding the electric model, I think the first switchover is going to be electric. That is my view.
But I was also told that, that there are some 6 hydrogen fuel cell buses that Tata Motors has developed. And
Yeah, we have developed. They are running in our Sanand plant.
So anything you can talk about it, Rahul, how many kilometers, and if not everything, any few initial observations that you have observed in terms of comparing it with diesel or hydrogen, with EVs, electric buses?
See, the first challenge, as I said, is the availability of the fuel. So while we have that with a special tie-up there, so that is one, and the cost of the fuel then. These two should make the TCO, like TCO is the subject which we are discussing today, should make it a more viable TCO for the end customer then. Which as on date is, again, as I said, is under, let's say, research and development kind of a thing for everyone, the fuel companies as well as the OEMs.
Sanjay ji, now that you are here, and welcome as a senior fellow at WRI India, and given your experiences in the bus space, I just want to also get your perspective that what do you see the viability? I think there was a question also, viability of hydrogen buses in India given the TCO challenges right now. I think earlier question was, what is the timeline you think India would be ready for hydrogen buses? And then, of course, specifically anything related to policy measures that we should start thinking that can go as inputs to the government bodies in terms of thinking of a scheme for hydrogen in the near future. So any perspective that you could share would be really helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Pawan, and good afternoon, everyone. So sorry for joining late. Coming back to the first question of yours about the TCO analysis and how the cost of the bus can be brought down. There are 2-3 ways, actually, different ways in which it can be done. First of all, government has to support, as all the panelists did point out, that government support is key in this particular area. And if you remember, in the FAME 1 scheme of DHI, there was a percentage of the bus price as the subsidy. So if they can go back to that 60% as the bus price, maybe that would be the good start. So nothing much has to be done in this. And if 60% bus price is subsidized, then naturally you can have a very good working. Second is maybe if fuel tax can be made in India, that should be what government should promote, and maybe they should give some PLI scheme for that also, because many of these fuel stack manufacturers are eager to come to India, and in fact they're looking at the big picture. So maybe it leads us to the third point, wherein we would expect a government to give us a clear policy on the numbers which can be there through this subsidy for next 3-4 years. So if these 3 things are done, I'm very sure the bus price will come down to somewhere around very near to the electric bus price, or maybe 10-15% more than the electric bus. So if you see the electric vehicle as compared to this fuel stack, the difference would be marginal, because battery price will come down with fuel cell and the stack price will goes up. That is the only change which happens, and maybe the cylinders. So that way, if you see the cost price difference, we should not be more than 20-30% of the electric bus price. So if these 3-4 measures are taken, I think it's very possible to get the price somewhere near 2 crores to 2.5 crores.
Do you think 60% subsidy, Sanjay ji, is that possible? Like for how many buses?
That is what actually, for at least 10,000 to 20,000 buses, first lot. So if this happens, I'm very sure, I mean, for intercity application, this is the best bus. See, right now, using an electric bus for intercity doesn't make sense, because you have 300 to 400 kilowatt hour battery size. Actually, after putting that, you don't have any space for the passengers. So you're basically carrying your batteries only. So intercity, it doesn't make sense. And more than 1.5 lakh intercity buses are with STUs itself. So these are the first ones which can be replaced immediately. So I think
yeah, I think even series now has posted a question which I'll come back to. But let me ask Dr. Guncha that refueling, which I think even Professor Geeta would be able to comment on, that refueling stations for hydrogen actually play a very critical role in development, in developing a complete infrastructure for hydrogen fuel cell bus. And we are talking now about putting this infrastructure in place to make all this long haul buses that we are discussing about operational. What do you think, if you can share your views and perspective, what will it take to get that done? And then Professor Geeta, I would also request you to comment on that, because I think you were doing some refueling station exercise also on the location, and how would we do the location selection and what parameters are to be used, that would, and any cost estimates that you could share, that would be helpful. First, Dr. Guncha.
Thanks, Pawan. So it's true that without the widespread hydrogen refueling station, this hydrogen vehicle or hydrogen fuel cell bus will strongly limit. So if we look at the refueling station, it will consist of electrolysis component if we want to produce green hydrogen, a compression system, a buffer storage system, right? And then dispenser system. Then we need also a pre-cooling unit. So all these technicalities will come when we'll be talking about refueling station. And I believe that refueling station will occupy a lot of cost thing, which has to be it has to be solved and admitted by the government and by other organizations for for successful deployment of this hydrogen fuel cell buses. So yeah, thank you.
So before I come to Professor Geeta, Rohan, in our TCO analysis sheet for refueling, what was the estimate that we used?
So currently for the green hydrogen part, we have used around 1.68 crores per bus. This is considering 30 kg of hydrogen being carried. So we are doing a back calculation of what is the kind of electrolyzer required. This for green hydrogen, and of course, like Guncha mentioned, the compressors and the storage requirement. With that, the calculation that we have come up to is around 1.68 to 1.8 crores per bus. So it's a very significant component.
And with gray, because I think Kumar Abhishek is also asking that question, that should we first start with gray? But just you give the cost estimates and then I'll go around the panel to say if gray hydrogen is the way to start the buses.
Yeah, so for the gray hydrogen, since it doesn't come through the electrolyzer process, the electrolyzer cost is sort of reduced. So it will be around 30 to 40 lakhs per bus will reduce. So we've taken around 1.05 to 1.18 crores. Because the electrolyzer part is removed, we can do it through the SMR, the CCUS or not. So it's around 1.18 crores per bus, while the green hydrogen part will be around 1.5 to 1.6 crores per bus.
Yeah. So Professor Geeta, coming back to you, I had now two questions for you. One is, what are the parameters that need to be considered while selecting a refueling station? And so yeah, why don't you touch upon that, and then I'll come to my next question too.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, I won't go into the technicalities of it because I'm not an expert there. But what we can look at is in terms of the routing decisions, right? So, typically, our bus networks, we say intercity bus networks, you have 2 or 3 hubs, and then there are multiple routes which emanate from these hubs, which go into the different villages and towns, right? So, if you're able to identify what these hubs are, and then if you're able to locate these hydrogen fueling stations in these hubs, all right, then we'll reduce total number of such fueling stations that are required, all right. And the trade-off, of course, is in terms of what should be the the fuel capacity that every bus can carry, compared with what is the cost of setting up these refueling stations. And from the numbers that we initially had, and none of these numbers are mine. I've just taken data that we got from sources. All right, that's of course that in the GZ report. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my mind, but if you can look at the cylinder sizes, adding 30%, 40% more size to the cylinder, the cost is not that high. However, if you have to locate a new hydrogen fuel station somewhere in the hinterland, the cost of that is much higher, correct? So therefore, initially at least, it makes a lot of sense to have perhaps slightly larger, cylinders to store more hydrogen in the buses, and then reduce the number of refueling stations that you have, so that the costs become manageable initially, right? But with, I guess, more people adopting it, there will be an economic case, there will be a business case to open a lot more refueling stations, in which case then, things will become very different. But it's always the initial few years which matter, and there I think we need to do careful planning. Therefore, locating these hydrogen filling stations strategically will be very important.
Sure. Any comments, Chandra or Sanjay?
Yeah, see, I would suggest that refueling stations can be at the depots, STU depots, because normally a bus operates for 400, 500 kilometers in these STUs most of the time. And they come back to the main depot after this 400-kilometer route. So having a station in the depots will help a lot. So you need not have a distributed stations across. To start with, I think managing through depots, the way we are doing it for electric, will make sense.
Thank you, Sanjay. Yeah, Chandra.
Basically, Sanjay raised a point about auto PLI, this fuel cell. So if you look at the scheme, which actually ended on 9th of January, actually, issued by DHI, they have actually given incentives for fuel cell as well as various components of electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. In terms of these dispensing costs, HRS, our working shows that our global dialogue and discussion show that the cost can be, for a 2-ton plant, can be in the range of around 22 to 25 crores, which effectively can suffice if you require a per bus. If somebody, operator requires say 25 kgs of hydrogen, it will suffice for around 80 buses. So if effectively it will be in the range of 30-35 lakh rupees per bus. But obviously with volume, that cost will come down significantly. As we are seeing, electrolyzer costs have also started coming down significantly. I think OMIM is quoting significantly lower price. So if that happens, I think over a period of time, in the next 3 to 4 years, I think the cost will come down significantly from a hydrogen production point of view and dispensing point of view. And more important, as Tata has actually won that IOCL tender. Even the NTPC tender is also now currently open, and they have requested for bids by around, I think, 7th or 8th of February. So with this, I think the volume for buses will also go up. So we are hopeful that in the coming days more, there are definitely different large number of inquiries in terms of hydrogen buses. Obviously, everybody is looking at the cost coming down and who goes first. But obviously, the government has to support, and we need to start somewhere so that those operational data are available for anybody to see, and how benefits can be derived from that. I think it is very important. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Professor Geeta.
Yeah. So good point. I think at current efficiencies, we talk about 11-12 kilometers per kilogram of hydrogen. Right? So at that kind of efficiencies, maybe a 25 kilograms storage is not going to be sufficient. Right? So I think we need to look at 40, 60, right? That's the range, especially if you're talking about intercity buses, right? So you have it in one depot, but then it makes a trip out and then it has to come back, right? So till it comes back, you need to have sufficient fuel in it, right? And then there is this range anxiety, so you need to add that extra 10-15%. And then there is this deterioration over time that's also positive, right? So we need to factor all of that. And then I think the size of these tanks have to be, I believe for intercity, 40 to 60 kilogram size tanks is what we should target.
Sure. I'll just pick up some questions from what audience have listed. So I think Polash, good to hear from you, from CSL is asking, do you think that a demand aggregation GCC model with support of subsidy could be a solution for initial deployment for the hydrogen buses? Because I know CSL is doing similar for electric buses, and they've opened the Grand Challenge last week. It was floated. So any thoughts around that, Sanjay ji? and it's open-ended. We have another 15-20 minutes, so please feel free to jump in and share your response. But yeah, Sanjay, why don't we start with you?
So yes, DCC something of similar to EV will surely help for fuel buses, and that is the way we can start actually in big numbers. Otherwise, you will always see 10 or 50 numbers coming, and that will not actually make a lot of sense. And um, I mean, it will be a very slow start if it happens otherwise. So GCC and through CESL, we can do big numbers, and the only challenge would be to get the infrastructure in place for charging, for fueling. So that is the only challenge which is there. Otherwise, we can have, in fact, as fast as electric buses, and even the fuel intercity buses are more in numbers. So the adoption could be much faster.
But this is assuming that OEMs are okay doing this, isn't it? Because we are assuming in GCC that someone is going to put the upfront cost. But let me ask Rahul and Chandra, I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but is GCC the model to really look for deployment of hydrogen buses?
Yeah, this will be, there is no doubt on that. GCC will be first thing and first promoter. But as I said, hydrogen is something a bit more complex today than the electric. Under development, R&D, a lot of things getting into. And this will take some time to actually take off from where it is today, because hydrogen as a gas is also, handling hydrogen is also a challenge today. So lot of infrastructure, policy making, and then a lot of investments from oil companies as well as the OEMs is what needs to get into today to take this off, including the GCC.
I think obviously the GCC model can work very well. We need to have at least initial 50-100 buses at one go in one particular tender, so that we are able to see some volume. I think this particular model can actually, be developed, say region wise. You can probably look at or center wise, say 100 buses plus, HRS, and then you can look at running those buses for 400 kilometers on a daily basis or 500 kilometers on a daily basis. So I think those kind of models, because typical 100 buses with HRS and everything can definitely, with some support from the central government as well as the state government, because a lot of state governments are also given subsidy for electric vehicles, so they'll probably give some subsidy for hydrogen vehicles also. So I think those kind of regional models development, I think, is the way forward, so that people are able to see the data, they're able to see the benefits, and I think GCC can definitely work in this particular area.
There's also a question that Kumar Abhishek had asked that given that hydrogen fuel contributes heavily towards TCO, we are very clear that the government is saying that it should be a green hydrogen-based policy. But in mobility, and this is to all my panelists, that, do you think gray hydrogen-based refilling stations is the way to start? Or do you think that transition later to green would become very difficult? Any thoughts around that? Professor Geeta, why don't I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's easier that way, right? But I think I think that's the only way. Right? If you talk about even electric vehicles, right? We are diving headlong into electric buses and electric cars and two-wheelers, whereas about 50-60% of the production is still from coal, right? Maybe higher. So I think that's the way we will start off with, right? It's not the ideal way, but that's how it's going to pan out. Like, I don't think there is any other option. But of course, for pilot projects, we can definitely look at subsidies and more green hydrogen production plants being set up, especially for pilot projects. So that can be good to showcase. But when you talk about mass market, I think again the next 5 to 10 years at least, it's going to be gray hydrogen which is going to dominate. I don't think green hydrogen will be anywhere cost competitive compared to gray hydrogen.
Yeah. Any thoughts there, Guncha?
Well, it's true actually, green hydrogen is costly, but this is the only way out. sooner or later we all of us will shift to green hydrogen only. So presently only 5% of hydrogen is produced from electrolysis. Otherwise, most of it by steam methane reforming and coal gasification. But over the period of time, it will be the electrolysis which will be taking part majorly all over the world for producing hydrogen. So yeah, so green hydrogen is the only answer.
So, but is gray the first option to start with?
I don't the thing is that if we produce gray hydrogen, then with every 1 kg of hydrogen, you produce 9 kg of CO2. Then what's the point of doing this hydrogen fuel cell bus altogether? You are producing CO2 at refueling stations and not producing on the roads. So why not to start with green hydrogen only if the main motto is to clean our country? So yeah, that's the thing.
So any thoughts there? Because I think I hear your perspective, Guncha, but the question is also about the technology readiness and the need to test. It's not that green hydrogen is readily available to run all these buses. So Chandra, moving to you, what would you really suggest?
Initially, I think for the first 1 or 2 years, you will have to look at gray as an option. Green hydrogen actually gets produced in a significant way, because India has more than 15,000 kilometers of LNG pipeline. So at least that distribution model is available today for us to really look at producing hydrogen there through last mile SMR process. I think one should begin with gray hydrogen, start running on the buses, and then slowly clear mandate that these operators or these users will start shifting to green hydrogen next. I think that approach will probably help in terms of compelling them to move to green hydrogen. Yeah.
Sanjay and then Rahul.
Yes, I also agree that most of the panel that start has to be done with gray only. We can't wait for the green to be there and then we start, because there are a lot of things to be done. Infrastructure has to be set up. There has to be learning, as you rightly said. Technology has to be developed. Localization has to be done. So all that can start with gray hydrogen, and later on, like even in electric, we are actually slowly moving. We would slowly move to solar also. So, but then that will take time. So we can't stop the development process and wait for the green hydrogen to be there to start the process.
When finally, Rahul.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what Sanjay told. So it would be similar approach. Start with gray and then keep developing and moving towards the greener part.
I think some of the attendees have suggested that it shouldn't be. But moving on, Shirish has been asking this question, right? Where he said that a French city recently cancelled hydrogen bus procurement, stating subsidies were there for CAPEX, but OPEX part is more challenging. So any thoughts around that the operations of hydrogen buses is quite unknown to many of us. In fact, I also I only have heard, and most of us probably don't even know how what are the operational aspects that are needed, honestly, admitting it here. But any thoughts around that how do we address these challenges? I think specifically, Chandra, I'll start with you. I mean, you have demonstrated a bus, so I think you'll have to tell us what are the operational challenges that you see will come up and how it will be addressed.
Yeah, if you look at the OPEX part, major component is obviously the cost of hydrogen. So, but then that can be in a way addressed some amount of dedicated biomass generation and converting that into green hydrogen, and some carbon credits being given to the farmers or the community which develops. That is one way to look at it. Second is other aspects or initial costs of the initial cost of the maintenance also, which is still not known from the hydrogen point of view, because at least battery electric we have been running so many buses, so we have clarity on the operation, on the maintenance part. So maintenance is also one area which is going to be of challenging scenario in the coming years. I think if we are able to address these two particular aspects, I think we should be able to have a OPEX cost which can be, we bring it down to significantly lower level. Obviously, the innovation part needs to really happen so that we are able to, get the cost of green hydrogen down. So I think people like Chromium, then I think Reliance is also talking about $1 by 10 in the next 10 years, $1 per kg. So these are the people or the corporates who are very serious about it, and one needs to look at how they can be supported, or how government can support this entire initiative to ensure that the hydrogen cost per kg actually can come down. And obviously improvement in terms of the mileage, from we currently see a mileage of around 14 to 15, but it can obviously go to 18 to 20 level.
So I think this is a question related to that which Chakrapani has posed in the Q&A. What is the range we can get for 1 kg of hydrogen at 350 bar versus 700 bar? So any of the panelists, if you're aware, if you can answer that question. So Chandra, you gave only.
I can comment. Say our current trials, it's in the range of 14 to 15, and obviously the hydrogen is filled at little lower pressure than 350. So because we are getting it from some other sources, other industrial sources. So I am difficult to comment say what will be the mileage at 350 or 700 bar, but at the current pressure levels that we have, I think it is in the range of 200 to 250 bar. We are able to get that mileage of 14 to 15, and I think as things improve, maybe we'll be able to better things. And as our trials happen, we'll have much more data on hand to really comment on that in a much better way.
Anyone wants to add anything to this? Any information or idea you have related to the pressure bar and range?
Well, for light duty vehicles, like for vehicle passengers, 700 bar. So it is 100 kilometer per kg. So normally this is what YouTube videos tell about Toyota and Hyundai. So this is what this figure is what they see for small duty vehicles.
Okay.
100 kilometers per kg is a big number, actually.
Yeah.
It's almost 7 times of what you're saying, Chandra.
That's light duty, right? That's cars.
Sorry, light duty cars.
So it's not buses. But still, that's a very high number. I mean, our literature has shown numbers of order of 12, 11 to 12 kilometers per kilogram. So.
Okay. And Vishal has been asking, which is, I thought it was an interesting question. And that do we also consider the possibility of retrofitting existing buses with hydrogen? Is that something anyone has thought about or talked about? Is that possible actually? Because I think we're talking about a completely different setup, right?
So I think that we are talking about using hydrogen as a fuel directly, rather than for the fuel cell idea, right? So I think I've not seen demonstrations of that yet.
See, we have been party to these BEV retrofitment standards also, and now BEV works well, but obviously hydrogen part no one has really tried. So that is a question, or that is a challenge all of us needs to really take it up.
Interesting. And I think Kiran has commented saying that retrofitting battery buses with fuel cell might be possible. Any thoughts around that?
I think we should not go that route. The cost of the hydrogen fuel cell is high end, right? So I don't think it's like the major part we're anyway investing in. Only the minor part we're trying to save. So I don't think that's the best route to do it. And I think the safety standards are also very different. So
there's an interesting comment I thought I'll read from Kumar. He says that whether market will think differently on hydrogen transport 1 year from now on long distance, once Tesla's long distance trucks come out. Can battery advances like energy density gains with solid state and the other Li batteries kill hydrogen transport together? I mean, I just want to hear as a thought? What do you see? We see so many technologies being talked about. We're talking about aluminum air, and then we are saying that with supercapacitors to implement in the EVs, and now with hydrogen. Where do you think that as the India we should be, at least specifically from the mobility, and let's only focus on mobility, that we should be focusing on? I think this is the last question I'll take up. Professor Geeta, let me start with you. Like, given that there are so many technologies, what do you think we should be doing?
So this is pretty much crystal ball gazing, right? So definitely, I think we should look at alternatives. See, carrying such a huge battery is not efficient. Right? That's my, especially for long distance travel, right? So a better technology is using those pantographs, right? Basically having those overhead lines. That's something that could be explored for long distance, highway based transportation. Right? That's something perhaps that's much more competitive. I would say to hydrogen, rather than talking about having 1-ton batteries being carried, right? So that's my thought. But none of us know the future. I think, but it's good to create some kind of a level playing field for all these options, so that they can fight it out, right? And then we see whichever is the best technology that emerges. Also, you need to have a kind of ecosystem for any of these to take off. Right, so the government should look to create that initial ecosystem, give everybody that level playing field from where they can compete and see what emerges as the best option. Right. One other point, I just want to mention, right, that French city, though it had good intentions, has done a lot of harm to the case of hydrogen. Everybody is quoting that, the French city moved from hydrogen to electric, right? So I think that's something that we have to be careful about. Many of us start with good intentions and it doesn't give us the right benefit. The same way, your TCO calculator will now be used to show how hydrogen buses are 3 times more expensive than diesel buses. So we start with a good intention, but doesn't quite work out as we anticipate, right? So that's a word of caution that I just wanted to put out.
So thanks for bringing that. I think that same thing happened when BRT was launched in Delhi, right? That and for many reasons, how it was, and it became like BRT will not work in India at all. And of course, in Ahmedabad, it did make work, and we saw how it became a very difficult conversations in other metropolitans. Yeah, Chandra, over to you.
See, a few from my side. I think Rohan mentioned about this cost per kilowatt. In terms of our own research and our own effort of building up the ground up vehicle, we are pretty confident when the number of buses actually cross 800 to 1,000, we should be able to bring the cost per kilowatt down to say less than $600. So from a current level of $1,500, I think at least in India, we should be able to bring it down to that level. And with more volumes, I think the cost will definitely come down. DOE has a very high target there. They're talking about less than $250 per kilowatt at say 25,000 buses or something like that. So they are pretty huge number. So one has to look at in terms of bus and the cost of the fuel cell ultimately coming down, so that we are able to move towards penetration in hydrogen. Yeah.
Thank you. Rahul?
Yeah, so maybe see, this is something which is too early to comment, but yeah, the technology anyhow we have to invest, we have to research, and we are doing all the time. And yes, we will see how it evolves over the period, how things change, economy changes, and if there is some kind of a move towards some government policies, infra development, everybody contributes, yes, it should move on. That is our view.
Thank you, Rahul. Sanjay ji, Guncha, quick thoughts, multiple technologies, multiple approaches. What should we be doing?
Well, it will be very interesting to see how the technology shift takes place in next 10-20 years. So we are looking forward to it.
So more of a witness and observer. Any predictions here, Sanjay ji?
I think we should try it out before actually commenting anything, because unless we try it out in India, we will not be able to comment on it. So it's better we try out with few hundred vehicles.
Yeah. No, fair enough. I think on that note, let me end this webinar panel and the TCO launch. Congratulations, Rohan and team, on this. I think the tool, as Professor Geeta mentioned, is not to show that should not be seen as how hydrogen cannot work today. I think we all understand that, but it is also about looking at what kind of policy measures would be needed in terms of subsidies, and how do we really start looking at it given in the near future. So in fact, if you're interested in exploring with the tool, would request you to send an email to rohan.rao@wri.org and play with the tool, and please share your feedback. And the hope is also to just start a conversation in this mobility space on the applications of hydrogen. And hopefully we have had some, I would say, interesting discussions, and some parameters and some understanding still needs to evolve. And I think all the panelists, we all recognize that. And I think there was already an acknowledgement that we are not an experts, everyone knowing everything. So that's good. But let me thank everyone. Professor Geeta, Chandra, thank you so much for joining from KPIT, Rahul from Tata Motors, Sanjay ji and Guncha from WRI. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Anandita, if you can copy the questions from the Q&A and also from the chat, I think we can take it up and we can stop the recording.